Please help me welcome Dr. James L. Green, who retired as NASA's chief scientist in January 2022 after 42 years of service. Congratulations.
That is the answer, by the way.
42. During his career, Jim held the position of chief scientist for 3 years and was the director of NASA's Planetary Science Division for 12 years. He oversaw missions across the solar system, including the New Horizons flyby of Pluto, the Juno orbiter to Jupiter, and the landing of the Curiosity rover on Mars. Jim has contributed to more than 100 scientific papers and has received several awards, including the Arthur S. Fleming Award in 1988 and Japan's Katani Prize in 1996. Let's welcome Jim.
Thank you very much. So I want to talk today about Mars sample return, and it's a very much in everyone's mind, bringing samples back to Earth. How are we going to do it? And it's not about not doing it because it's too expensive or whatever the concept is that you hear sometimes. It's all about finding a way to make it a normal process that we can afford and that we can do it in a timely manner. And so there's a phase space in all this that hasn't been really looked at very much, and that's a single launch to Mars and a return. What we know about Mars sample return is it's very important for the planetary science community. That's essentially where it started. So for 2 decadals, it was one of the top things that we need to do. The highest priority in the last decade was bringing those samples back. And indeed, starting sample return was the highest priority in the previous decadal, and we did. And that mission is Perseverance. Now, what's happened currently, as you all know, I'm sure, is that as we're moving towards a basic architecture for Mars sample return, NASA goes through a variety of reviews, and in the last review, it was determined, well, this is complicated, multiple missions with multiple schedules. Did we have the cost right? Did we have the schedule right? And indeed, it seemed to be some mismatches, all right? Now, you have to recognize this is a normal process, all right? These strategic missions, which are several $billion, are very hard to do. You have to explore a large number of options. You have to be able to create partnerships and do international coordination. There's so many aspects to this. So the fact that NASA has asked for out-of-the-box ideas is exactly what they should be doing. Okay? Now, the reason why this is also important is that, as I mentioned, we want to be able to make this routine. How many samples did we bring back from Apollo? A bunch, many times. Are we really going to bring more than one set of samples back from Mars? And the answer is yes. And the reason why is if you look at the National Academy's report, Safe on Mars, one of the key features of that is once you figure out where you're going, we're going to need samples back from that area because we want to know a lot about the area before we put humans down. Everything from the toxicity to the soil to the kind of resources and mineralogy that's available there. So samples coming back from the exploration zone where humans will go to Mars will be the next set, okay? And of course, humans have to be able to get off the surface. And so we also are thinking about how the MAV, Mars Ascent Vehicle, can evolve over time such that we learn something important in this example, and we use that for a series of MAV opportunities to grow that capability, to enable humans to go to Mars, and then, of course, return. So let me give you an overview of where we are today. So this is the area where Percy has landed. If you haven't heard the nickname Percy, we call it Percy all the time. It landed in Octavia Butler landing area where the star is. So the landing ellipse was fairly tight, about 11 kilometers in size. And this is in a crater floor, Jezero crater. It's in the floor of the crater, up towards an area that looks pretty spectacular. So in the upper left corner, this huge area, a mound of material, what is that all about? It's an ancient delta. Perhaps 2 rivers flowed into this area over time. And of course, it filled the crater. still water in the crater, rapidly moving water in the rivers, carrying silt hundreds of miles upstream, dropping, therefore, its silt, creating this 70-meter tall delta. Imagine stopping the Mississippi, draining the Gulf of Mexico, looking at New Orleans, and it would look like this. This is the delta. What's in the delta in New Orleans? Dead life all over the place. A stratigraphy that's sitting in this beautiful mound of material over tens of millions of years, maybe 100 million years or more, of some fantastic opportunities for us to see the evolution of this planet, and in particular, whether there are life in those samples. Now, is that extant life? Well, when the environment gets extreme, life loves to go into the rocks, okay? And so if we go to the Earth and we say, what's life like in the rocks here? What you find out is something that goes like this. There's 5,000 plus minerals on this Earth, and 349 of them are made from dead life. So when we bring back the rock record, we're going to look at the mineralogy, and we're going to be looking for these kind of important signatures that tell us this history as we walk up this beautiful delta and make these samples. Percy has 43 tubes, puts samples in these tubes. It cores rock. So it creates a core. It's about the size of a chalkboard chalk. And for the few in our crowd that may not know what that means, it's the size of a large Crayola crayon, all right? And it puts it in a sleeve, and that sleeve is sealed, and then we manage those samples in various ways that we'll talk about. Well, we've got 43 sample tubes. Percy already has on board 21 completed samples. It's dropped 10 samples already in a place called Three Forks. And in a matter of years, a few years, with the 12 remaining tubes, it can easily fill those. Now it's currently way up the delta. It's not on this figure. But by 2028, the plan is for it to fill the 12 remaining tubes. Now it'll have 33 tubes filled with sample material, and it will return to Three Forks. Now it can sit there and wait for the MAV, or it can actually drop those samples at Three Forks. Okay, so here's where Three Forks is. Here's where the samples are laying on the ground. They're separated by several meters, 5 to 10 meters, and therefore they're arrayed such that we can pick them up in many different opportunities, whether it's a helicopter or a fetch rover, whatever the concepts are that are rolling around today. All right, so how do we approach this problem? This is an architectural decision tree, okay? It has start of two basic branches. One branch on the right starts with multiple missions to return those samples. Why multiple missions? When this tree was initially started by John Connolly more than 2 decades ago, I mean, we've been thinking about this a while, the technological capabilities that we were developing that we would have by the time we were getting ready for sample return boiled down to the ability to put 2 ton down on the ground. So if we can get 2 metric ton down on the ground, what kind of MAV can we have? If we load the MAV and we blast it off, how far will it go? So this is the side that NASA has been studying. And I mean tens of studies have gone on this tree. You know, multiple launches, multiple spacecraft, how you return to Earth, you know, all these different processes. And then, of course, you can calculate the probability of success, all right, which is down in the bottom. And this is what was worrying the review panel, and that is that we add other components, and we keep adding components, like two fabulous helicopters, okay, when we just figured out how to fly. Now you add even more complexity to it, so there's the worry, all right? So if NASA's exploring that side, what is the mission design, the reference mission design? Well, here's what it looks like. And once again, with Percy, we've completed the side of collecting the samples. Now we got to go get them. What you see is multiple launches. You see the one launch to put a MAV down on the ground with only the capability to get it into orbit, and then another spacecraft to hunt that sample set down, encapsulate it, and bring it back, and then drop it off, and it goes into the receiving facility. Okay, let's explore the other side. Here's a new set of opportunities. Now, why has this come about? It's come about because the technologies have now allowed us to look at it. What are those technologies? So we heard yesterday by Prasan the HIAD. The HIAD is this fabulous system that inflates. It then is a huge aeroshell, and it's at a TRL of 4.5 to 5. This is why I asked him. It's nearly there, which would be 6. It has a huge opportunity to be tested continually here on Earth for many other reasons, like bringing back rocket material on the ground so that we can build more rockets more cheaply. So that's only going to get better over time, and it can put 20 ton down on the ground. Whole new ball game. Whole new ball game. And so let's take a look at that. And the other thing is, how can we get the 20 ton there? The SLS. All right? Now, when we first started Mars Sample Return, we had neither of those. Now we have a new game in town, and it's a perfect time to step back and take a new look at this, and that's exactly what NASA is doing. Okay? So this is the normal process. Okay, regardless of what you might read in the press that NASA doesn't know what it's doing, and now we're going to send everybody back to the showers. This is the way it goes. All right? Okay, so the concept then is one launch vehicle. It's the SLS. What does it do? It's carrying a massive payload. What is that payload? Well, it's a Mars entry and descent aeroshell. All right? It has the propulsive descent module. So in other words, the aeroshell expands, slows it down, drop the aeroshell, and of course now you want to get down to the ground, you've got to have the retro rockets to do it, and a 2-stage MAV, along with the sample canister and an encapsulation system. And it has a fetch rover. Okay? And we can use Perseverance as a backup, which is one of the reasons why it'll be sitting at Three Forks at our beck and call if we need it. All right? So then the concept simplifies greatly. We have one launch, lands on Mars, okay? 20 ton plus. We then deploy the fetch rover, goes to Three Forks. Now we'll land it, somewhere in the crater floor. Let's say we put it back at Octavia Butler. Wouldn't that be wonderful? She'd have the only place in the solar system where we landed twice. And then we know how to go from there to Three Forks, because that's what Percy did. And we can follow the yellow brick road. That's the path Percy takes. We know everything about it. We filmed the heck out of it. We know if there's sand traps or anything else that we have to do. And even if it goes like this, we don't care, because a fetch rover can be done quickly, move quickly, get to Three Forks in some way, and bring back, load up all the samples, okay? And then bring them back to the MAV, and then load them up into the second stage, into the canister, and then encapsulation system, and blast it off, get it into orbit, and then from orbit, bring it home. And then direct entry, or a variety of other processes could be thought of, even orbiting the moon and have it go to the gateway, even, many other ways you could think of it from there. But that's the basic idea to start simplifying this. So I basically just said that, so we'll go to that. Here's an artist's conception of what it looks like, with actually Percy delivering the samples, but it could be the fetch rover, all right? Now, is Percy going to last that long? Okay, is that something that we can do realistically? Well, this is one of the reasons why you want an alternate. You want to have perhaps 2 mechanisms to be able to get the samples. Could it be a helicopter? Well, that's another option. All these things could be thought about and looked at. But indeed, if Curiosity's been on the surface since 2012, Percy ought to be able to last that long, because Percy is pretty much an identical copy with just the instruments pulled out from Curiosity and new instruments brought in. All right? Same basic architecture and structure, and it's tremendously healthy right now anyway. All right, so now we have the opportunity, indeed, with an arm to be able to fill the sample canister and be ready to go. Well, let's take a look at what it takes to get home. All right, so here's the delta V calculation. Lift off to high orbit, 5,312 meters per second. That's pretty hefty, okay, but we can do it. Yeah, throw in some mid-course correction after you do the injection, which is another 1,000 plus meters per second, and you get a total. These end up being fundamental things that you put into the design of the rocket and capability, therefore you size it that way. What about the return, all right? Well, once you then decide now it's time to go back, and oh, by the way, if the fetch rover does what we expect it to do, that within a matter of a couple weeks after it lands, it loads those samples into the MAV. By that time, we're coming back on the same opportunity. Okay? So schedule-wise, you bring the samples back fast. So that means we put some dates in these and calculations. So May 8, 2035. We like the 2024 opportunity because that gives us the best energetics for getting to Mars and then landing. Throw in a mid-course correction, arrive at Earth 190 days later. That's fantastic. Now, to be able to just do this simply is going to require an Earth entry vehicle with a certain, 201 kilogram. Here's your MAV. That's pretty hefty. 11-ton MAV, all right? 11-ton MAV. Descent module, aeroshell. Total is 24 plus metric tons. Close to what the current HIAD could do. Some research still needs to be done on that. And there's 6 ton of margin in the SLS. This is why it is a super heavy lift launch vehicle. Okay, so it's really important to note that we really need to evolve from this MAV into more capable MAVs over the long run, and that's why we've got to think about it not as a dead end, but as an evolvable system, and it's got to be big. We need it big because we need the samples back, and we need as many of those as we can. And it turns out there's no reason to think we can't bring all of them back if we do this economically. So to reduce mission complexity, one of the top things NASA wants to do, this new concept is do it in one launch. Now, it also means that you've got to have the capability of the rocket in 2-stage to get it to the Earth vicinity and then figure out how to be able to get the samples back or use one of the normal paths that we've been thinking about, which is direct entry. And oh, by the way, that direct entry system has no parachutes. Okay, because we've done things where we've dropped capsules in the atmosphere and the parachutes have failed, all right? Last thing we want to do is break open the canister. So it will be designed to go through the atmosphere and hit without a parachute, okay, and not break open. That mass you also have to add to the MAV, and that means you got to have a very capable MAV. It also means only the SLS can take it there. So bottom line is we're looking at a new space because technologically we can, and it's the right next step to consider. Thank you very much. I have time for a couple questions.
Yeah, one quick question. Considering that, of course, things are progressing to sending humans to Mars, what is the time lag between when humans would normally be expected or projected to be on Mars that they could bring the samples back, which would seem much simpler?
Sounds great, but once again, not only do we need the samples back to understand what the environment's like in its evolution, but we're going to need samples back from where they go, okay? And look at the soil toxicity and make sure that they're going to be safe on Mars. So this has to be then the second sample return for them, and then we should go. So we need to be able to pull this off in a repetitive manner and create the capability to develop a MAV that'll get them off the surface. So it's just the start. And we have to think about it that way. Yes?
So one of the key tenets to the MSR architecture is breaking the chain.
Yes.
You know, making sure that we ensure forwards and backwards planetary protection. I just was curious how this architecture plays into that and, you know, abides by the rules of breaking.
You have to break the chain. Now, the probability that there's pathogens in the samples is very low, but it's not zero. So we're going to break the chain. You can break the chain in many different ways. That's what needs to be studied based on the architecture. You could load the canister, and then the canister flops down into a system that breaks the chain in the MAV, or you can do it by perhaps putting the capsule in orbit about the Earth and the Moon, and then encapsulating it, and then landing it. Those things all have to be studied and costed.
Well, Jim, it's great to see a new innovative type of architecture. A question I have is, how does this address the cost issues that are currently with Mars sample return?
Well, the SLS is in the budget. Did you hear me?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
So the SLS is in the budget, and is it an agency rocket or not? Is it going to be used for agency purposes or not? Okay? Right now it's for human exploration, but we've already got a series of human exploration elements in the Artemis program, but we're building one SLS a year.
So how does the rest of the system address the cost issues, and can that fit under what is considered to be a cost cap for Mars sample return?
That needs to be costed. That's just one of the elements of why it's a study.
Okay.
But it opens that trade space.
Yeah, okay.
Now, if the SLS is provided GFE because it's already in the budget, now we're talking about a delta. Now we got a much better chance to get well below the cost bogey.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. That was terrific. Hopefully you made an impact with that.